Corrections Notebook, week 28. So the first prison in the United States was the Walnut Street Jail. Your chapter 10, it tells you all about the history of corrections. And that's what these notes, a lot of them are going to be for this week. It's kind of weird. It was a prison, but it was originally a jail. Then they turned it into a prison and they kept the name. So it was the Walnut Street Jail. Then they turned it into a prison. And that was the very first prison that we had in the United States. And you see on this little picture here, 1774, Philadelphia. So it was just a large open room that everyone was held in together. So you need to know that. You're going to see a question on a test, probably more than once. What was the first prison in the United States? And the answer is the Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Walnut Street Jail, as I said, was a prison, but it was originally a jail, and then they made it into a prison, but they kept the name. And I got a little map here to show you right where Philadelphia is. The Quakers then came up with the Pennsylvania system of prison design. So we're still talking about architecture a little bit, and there's a Quaker. And you have to think about who were the Quakers. They were very, very religious people, and they were the pioneers for this brand new philosophy. So the Pennsylvania system gave every inmate their very own large cell. And if you recall, what was the Walnut Street Jail? One big open room that everybody was held in together. So the Quakers came along and they said, you know what, we got a better idea. Let's give single cells to every single prisoner and we'll make them really big. So the very first prison that was built under the Pennsylvania system was called Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. And here's a picture of what it was. In fact, it's still standing today. I believe they closed it, and I think they have tourist tours. Like, I think there was a TV show about haunted inmates in Eastern State Penitentiary. It was a very, very hard prison, but inmates were totally separated from each other. And this was the very first solitary confinement. Inmates were in their cells 23 hours a day, every day, for all of the years of their sentence. And these are pictures of actual hallways of single cells at Eastern State Penitentiary. And obviously you can tell it's in pretty bad shape. I'm not sure what year they closed. They do not currently house inmates, but that would be a good little project for somebody to find out when they closed. Eastern State Penitentiary was the first prison under the Pennsylvania system. It's really important to remember. So each cell was very large so that the inmate could perform what's called handicrafts in his cell. And he could weave or make furniture or shoes, anything that only required hand tools. And this kept the inmate occupied and productive. And obviously this is quite dilapidated. It certainly didn't look like this when it housed inmates, but you can see the size of the cell here. This is one of them. And the idea behind solitary confinement was that the inmate would reflect on his bad deeds and be sorry or serve penance. And this is where the word penitentiary comes from. So to be sorry, to serve penance, that is certainly a Quaker philosophy. And a little fun fact for you, Al Capone, one of America's most notorious gangsters, was housed at Eastern State Penitentiary, and he went there in 1929. They say he was able to pay off the guards to get anything that he wanted in his cell. And this is actually a picture. They recreated it, but this is how his cell was. Totally ridiculous. It's like he's at his own house, but he was Al Capone, so he just paid people to get him what he wanted while he sat in prison. He was obviously quite comfortable. Corrections was not a career as it is today, and there was no training or professionalism within the staff. So they also said that he got whatever food and drink he wanted, including alcohol. The Pennsylvania system wasn't working though, because it was extremely expensive to house single inmates in such huge cells. Their handicrafts, their little shoes and rugs that they would loom, they didn't cover even a fraction of the cost of building and running the prison. And in addition, having no human contact for years was not rehabilitative. So here comes New York again, becoming a leader in corrections. We came up with the Auburn system. The Auburn system was developed in Auburn, New York. And instead of solitary confinement, congregate care was used. Congregate. So that means together, to be together. Auburn Correctional Facility in Auburn, New York, was the first to use the congregate care system, and it became known as the Auburn system. Auburn system. So you see these are some old-timey pictures here, but the inmates would all be together out of their cells, not in their cells. And this meant that the inmates were only in their cells at night to sleep. They were out all day working with other inmates in industry. So, this is kind of around the time that the Industrial Revolution was happening and machinery could be brought in. And so they were able to mass produce goods, which was way more economical for the taxpayers and the corrections facility to mass produce goods that they could, sell either to the public or to use themselves within their institutions. So that was way more efficient than just making a pair of shoes one at a time, or making a stool or a piece of furniture one at a time. But you see over here, the cells got really tiny because the only thing they were supposed to do in their cell was sleep. So some inmates had to turn sideways to get in there, super tiny. Mass production of goods produced in prison shops by inmates was able to significantly reduce the cost of running the prisons. And so you see, I'm not really sure what they're doing here, but maybe a printing shop? Not sure. In addition, being around other people, other inmates all day was much more rehabilitative to the prisoners, and they were able to learn and use transferable work skills for when they were released. So today, every prison has some sort of industry. And P.S., the Auburn system is the system still in use today, not only by New York, but the entire country. This is what we currently have in our state prisons, the Auburn system, congregate care. Inmates are out of their cells all day, going to work, going to programs, and doing things to rehabilitate themselves. So this, you can see here that these inmates are sewing. I know that Coxsackie Correctional, which I mentioned last week, they have a sewing shop, and they make all of the socks, t-shirts, underwear for all inmates in the state of New York. Prison industry in New York is run by CoreCraft, and their main office is in Menands. Actually, it's right next to St. Agnes Cemetery. You might have seen this logo on the side of a truck or on the side of that building, and that is prison inmate goods that are being transferred or transported for either to another correctional facility or to sell to the public. Elmira Correctional Facility has a working farm, and I know that they grow fruits and vegetables, and those fruits and vegetables are then used within the prison system. Yes, license plates actually is a thing. They did make, I'm not sure which prisons, but or even if there's one here in New York, but prison inmates did and do make license plates. So, and they make office furniture actually. There's a lot of chairs and desks that you'll see this Corecraft sticker on the bottom of it, and that means it was made by an inmate. And as a matter of fact, every single blue chair that you sit in every single day, that was made by inmates. If you turn it over when you get back, you'll see your Corecraft sticker. Little fun fact. So corrections has also had some failures. There have been many attempts and innovative ideas to make corrections better for the inmates, staff, public, and taxpayers, but many of them have failed. One of them is the Panopticon. It's a really cool idea. It unfortunately didn't work. And this is in your textbook. I believe this is a vocabulary word for you this week. Panopticon, what do you see? You see a central tower, and you see this round tiers of cells. And the idea was that one officer could stand in his area here and just have a 360-degree view of every single cell and every single inmate in every single cell. The only problem was it didn't work. So the Panopticon idea was that the warden or the CO could stand in a central tower and see into every single cell from that one position. He couldn't. So the idea was abandoned. And to my knowledge, we do not have any standing Panopticons today. Another idea that has not worked out too well is the privatization of prisons. Private for-profit companies contract with the state to build the prison, house, supervise, and feed the inmates and hire the staff. Because private companies said, you know what, government is there's so much red tape, they're so inefficient, we can do the same thing for a whole lot less money, and that's going to save the taxpayers a bunch of money. That was the idea. The company said that they could do it much cheaper, saving taxpayers money because they didn't have the red tape, bureaucracy, and expense state governments did. But what we found out is that the companies could do it cheaper because they cut a lot of corners. For example, inferior building materials to save money. They made the prisons unsafe and easy to escape from. Serious overcrowding to make a profit. Isn't this gross? No background checks on staff because they hired criminals to be corrections officers. Why? Because they could pay them minimum wage. They dumpster dived for food or bought expired food and served it rotten to the inmates to save money. Disgusting. And inferior health care for the inmates. I mean, they didn't take care of them at all. Look at this poor guy. Just left him there because it costs money to provide health care and supervision and nutrition and all of those things. So that's how they were making their money. So there are still some states in the western part of the country that have private prisons, but most do not. Most have abandoned the idea, including New York. We never have and we never will privatize our correctional facilities. And that's it, guys. That's it for week 28 notes. Please write in the document that I shared with you if you have any questions or comments. And I'm looking forward to seeing your journal and your work this week.